Hello, everybody. This is Steve Smith at WCG Patient Radio. WCG is a company focused on the ethical, safe, and efficient conduct of clinical trials to bring more medicines to patients with unmet medical needs. We're speaking today with Mr. Jeffrey Borghoff about his diagnosis at age 51 of Alzheimer's disease. Jeff is a software architect and developer, and he's a board member of the Greater New Jersey chapter of the Alzheimer's Association and a national spokesperson for the Alzheimer's Association, and a participant in the Alzheimer's Association's Early Advisory Group. Hello, Jeff.
Hello, good morning. I'm very happy to be here with you this morning.
It's an honor to have you here, Jeff. Many people think of Alzheimer's disease as something that happens to elderly people, and you are relatively young for a person with Alzheimer's. How did you come to know that you had Alzheimer's, and is that unusual for someone you're so young as you to be diagnosed?
Well, in general terms, we think of dementia. It's an umbrella term for several neurodegenerative diseases, and Alzheimer's disease being one of them. But in general terms, we think of dementia as being a set of symptoms that happens to people who are older. Over the age of 65, in their 70s and their 80s, your grandparents living in an assisted living sort of scenario. But in fact, they are neurodegenerative diseases, and they can occur in the what's called younger onset, and that's my case. I was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease at the age of 51 in 2016. And if you look at the statistics, it's about 10% of the population of people who have been diagnosed in the country, which is about 5.8 to anywhere from 5.8 to 6 million people nationally. 10% of that are people in the population of younger onset, early stage Alzheimer's disease, and honestly, I think that number is probably greater because many people are reluctant to get a diagnosis of a dementia at such an early age. And I can tell you from my experience living with the disease now for 4 or 5 years that there are people in the community of living with Alzheimer's disease where, I know folks who are in their 30s who have been diagnosed. So it definitely is a myth with regard to the age, and I think that's one of the things that it's good to communicate and really make it people more knowledgeable about the what is Alzheimer's disease, what is dementia, and when it can affect you. So yeah, it was. I was diagnosed when I was 51 years old.
So how has this impacted your life and the things that you do every day?
Well, now when I was originally diagnosed, certainly it was a gut punch. To be honest with you, I was having some neurological issues, which brought us to the diagnosis. And so I really had to do a kind of a 180 on with my life, and because at that point, at that juncture in my life, I had to retire. I gave up my license to drive, and so there was a drastic change in my lifestyle, and those things were necessary. I needed to retire because I could no longer do or function in the capacity that I was functioning in with my work as a software architect. I could no longer drive because I was had lost some of the decision cognitive abilities that I formerly had. And so what happens is you end up reprioritizing your life and kind of taking an inventory of the things that really matter in your life, and then reprioritizing your life around those things. And since then, I've been pretty successful at that. I've been leading a very purposeful, engaging, joyful life, regardless of the fact that, with all intent and purposes, I do have a terminal disease.
And you're married, and you and your wife have 3 children. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes, we do. Yes. We have our 3 children, young adults, are college graduates. On the path to leading very successful lives on their own. And my wife, who is my care partner, wife and care partner, is doing very well as well. She's an amazing care partner, and I say care partner because at this juncture in our lives, because I'm still living independently for the most part, there's a distinction between care partner and caregiver. My wife really doesn't need to do much for me. And so it's more of a care partner role. Whereas if the disease progresses, which we hope, given some other things that we're doing, that it progresses very slowly, that at some point she will be a caregiver, where she may need to do more for me than I could do for myself. But yes, wife and 3 young adult children.
I know it's a whole family thing that on a daily basis, when somebody has Alzheimer's disease, that everybody there is impacted. And in your case, I know that you got together as a family and did some things to deal with it, including, I believe, does your wife go on the road with you speaking to others about Alzheimer's disease?
Oh, yes. So the thing about a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease with a family is that it's not just the one person who has Alzheimer's disease. It's really that what happens is the dynamics of it is that the entire family has Alzheimer's disease, because there's a new world, a new normal that has to occur with that person, and everyone comes together. All your loved ones come together and become involved in that person's life, with respect to living with that disease. And so on my kids' part, they have the role that they play in it. But for my wife, she does a lot of road trips with me, because I do a lot of public speaking. And as part of my advocacy work, I do a lot of public speaking, a lot of engagements, a lot of peer-to-peer work. But Kim has been unbelievable. My wife, Kimberly, has been unbelievable with respect to really being someone who really participates across the board with me with my advocacy work, and she's great. She's actually had some opportunities to speak to very large crowds about her role as a caregiver, a care partner, and what that has meant to her, and the role of a caregiver, care partner.
Well, that's really the power, I think, of speaking out, and when families work together to build awareness, and the Alzheimer's Association too, because it's that awareness that gets other people moving forward with thinking about whether it's diagnosis or funding, helping raise funds. There are so many things people can do and it keeps the people who have Alzheimer's from going through it totally alone. It's a big impact on society, so it will help if society rallies to the cause. And you yourself have. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say yes, and indeed, and we categorize it. When I say we, the people, the community, the various organizations. It is a public health crisis because it's such a drain on society. The people aren't the drain. It's the cost of it. It's the human cost of it. It's the emotional cost of it. It's the financial cost of it. That's the drain on society, and that's why it's such a public health crisis. But please go on with what you were saying.
Yes. To your point there, I know that there's a number like something I've heard them say at the National Institutes of Health. I believe every 57 seconds somebody's diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. I may be off a little bit, but it's an awful lot of people. And I've seen the numbers they present to Congress when they're looking for funding for the NIH, who does a great job in doing the research that someday will help us get the treatments into clinical trials. And they talk about the cost of Alzheimer's disease in our society in so many millions of dollars, just the cost of medical care, and then so many more millions of dollars for the lost wages and the lost opportunities and the people no longer able to be productive, contributing, tax-paying members of society in the way they would have been if there hadn't been Alzheimer's. So this enormous impact financially on society gives legislators something to be motivated by and making whatever they can do to support, which often involves funding the National Institutes of Health. That funding is going to help.
Indeed, and that's why I work so hard with my state and federal legislators to get the appropriate bills, pieces of legislation and bills supported and passed at the state and federal level, so that we can build a better infrastructure to support our economy, and also to do a better job at raising funds to, potentially find a way to slow the progression of the disease and eventually a cure for Alzheimer's disease, and for that matter, many other of the neurodegenerative diseases. Alzheimer's makes up about 80% of the cases, but there's certainly other neurodegenerative diseases like frontal temporal lobe, Lewy body, vascular dementia. We need to figure out all of that. I think the research that's being done at the Alzheimer's disease level will eventually lead to helping those other diseases. But it's vastly important that we get the funding and for research to make this happen, and then also legislature to build the infrastructure to support how we're going to implement a plan to overcome the deficits in the country that we have that basically support the issues that we're having with the economy as it being a public health crisis.
Yes, and so the awareness generating that you do when you speak out, and the Alzheimer's Association, all the folks that make people aware, that awareness is what can lead legislators to realize this is actually pervasive. It's both sides of the aisle. It's not Republicans or Democrats who get Alzheimer's, it's human beings. That is often enough for us to get some kinds of change and support done when they realize this is not something that needs to be divisive. This is something both sides can agree on. And we see that they actually do put a lot of funding in. And I wanted to ask you about that. One of the results of funding at the NIH, if people don't know, is that it generates the pre-research that supports the start of clinical trials, and it creates the science and the progress in science that will enable many of the pharmaceutical companies that we need to complete these trials to do the trial. And we had a big disruption to Alzheimer's trials earlier within the last 12 months, where a lot of trials stopped because some of the evidence went away that they were going to work. And then one trial did get started again when they found a different way to look at the data. This brings a lot of hope, and there's a sort of up and down roller coaster ride of patients who need this medicine. You yourself have been in a clinical trial that's important to you. Could you tell us about that?
Certainly, you actually are speaking. The reference that you made really does apply to the clinical trial that I was on. It's Biogen's what they're calling the aducanumab drug, and I was in it for three years, 36 months, and when it abruptly ended, because there was a futility analysis that had occurred that has suggested that the drug was not going to meet its primary endpoint of improving cognition in individuals. However, it had already been proven that it does slow the progression of the amyloid plaque and remove a plaque that's already there. So that's a major plus. However, it didn't meet the FDA primary endpoint of actually improving cognition. And so at that point, they had, because of that, they decided to terminate the trial. However, that was in March of 2019, but in October of 19, after several months of analyzing smaller data sets in conjunction with larger data sets, they were able to establish that the drug in fact was working, because they had two paths. They had two paths. They had an engage and an emerge. There were two different names. And so what happened was they looked at a data set from a larger infusion milligram percentage, and they basically established that people who were on this basically infusion milligrams per body weight were actually showing improvement. And so what they did was they reopened the clinical trial, and all of the people who were on it in the past were given the opportunity to go back into the trial open label, meaning everyone who was on it were allowed to come back into the trial, getting the infusions at the 10 milligrams per kilograms body weight, and they were all going to get the medication rather than some getting the placebo, some getting the medication. So everyone who's in the clinical trial again now is actually on the medication. So that really it was it was a gut punch when they actually canceled it the first time, because myself and many other people who are on the clinical trial and were on medication saw an improvement in our lifestyle, our cognitive abilities, et cetera. And so when they canceled it, it was really it was a gut punch. But we took some time, and then when they came back in October, they began to redosing. It was phenomenal for all of us to get back on that medication. I just so happened to be the first person in the world to get the medication for the new trial. For some reason Biogen and my trial center picked me as number one. So I've been on it the longest for this new trial, and I feel great. The medication I believe is working, and they just recently submitted the medication to the FDA for final approval. So hopefully, within a matter of time, it'll be approved by the FDA and then ready for prime time.
That's a very compelling story about the value of clinical trials to patients. People hear about clinical trials, but when you're a patient and that's your source of medicine, it's vital. And when trials are held up, it can be quite upsetting. And when it happens because of science and safety, that of course is something we all understand. But sometimes that even happens. The trials are held up because of funding freezes. When the politicians in Washington begin to argue about budgets and sequester funds and so forth, this has happened in recent memory. So it's just that much more important for the average citizen to be aware of clinical trials as a source of medicine, as a source of treatment and cures, and to support that infrastructure, or at least not work against it. What are the main things you want people to know about Alzheimer's?
I think with regard to the disease itself is, number one, is that it's a disease like other disease. With respect to it's a neurodegenerative disease. It is a disease that a person will have. Another person may have a disease like diabetes, and so on and so forth. But it is a disease, and it's something that those of us who live with this disease, we shouldn't be ashamed of it. We should be, we should be able to say, yeah, I have Alzheimer's disease, and not feel ashamed that we're going to be stigmatized. And those people, and people who people shouldn't stigmatize people with Alzheimer's disease, because
that's actually a big topic in a lot of diseases. When people stop and look at what the impact of stigma, it really holds back progress. For individual patients, it can be disastrous if they don't want to come out and be diagnosed or access medicine they're entitled to, or their families don't want to help them. But also to society in general, that diseases, science can be slowed down. Public policy that these legislators put in can be slowed down. If there's a stigma, if they feel like this isn't a disease that, in the past we've had diseases legislators didn't feel deserved treatments.
Yeah, and I think part of the problem there is that, or part of the issue is that most of the clinical trials that are being worked on right now, the medical clinical trials, are being worked on or being done with younger onset folks like myself at a very early stage.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the issue is that people who are beginning to show signs at a very younger age, like myself, don't like to admit that there are problems, and so they go into this denial phase, and because they know that there's a stigma against people with a dementia. And so they deny that they have the disease, and certainly they're unwilling to go into clinical trials, which is, or getting early diagnosis, which is the two most important things for us to help, eradicate this disease. So if we can do a better job of saying, hey, you're 50 years old, you're showing signs of symptoms of dementia. Let's figure out what it is. It's okay. It's a disease just like any other. You have an opportunity to go into a clinical trial that is well established and could potentially save your life and many, many millions of other lives. So, that's the way, our society and our culture should be pitching it. Not, there's something wrong with you. There could be, something psychologically wrong with you, because, people, there's stigmas attached to that as well. So part of my job as an advocate and as a spokesperson is to let people know that, this disease does not define who you are. What defines who you are for me is the last 50 years of my life, before I had my disease. But now this is part of who I am. Part of who I am now is a person living with disease, but also helping other people who are living with the disease. And so I think anyone who is young and has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, they are in a position to help break down the walls, the stereotypes, and the stigma of the disease, so that we can do a better job at all levels to get people engaged.
I would just like to say, and we're running out of time now, but what an inspiring thing it is to have a spokesperson like you. The way that you can frame this and clarify and bring awareness to the cause, and the way that you have a point of view and give people a call to action that is meaningful to so many. And I think that can benefit so many that you're doing that. So thank you very much for speaking with us today, Jeffrey.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for allowing me to bring my voice to the table.
We've been speaking today with Mr. Jeffrey Borghoff. This is Steve Smith, WCG Patient Radio. Special thanks to our executive producer, Lauren Osmore, and production team, Isabel Andresen and Roxana Guilford-Blake, our technical director, David Fogel, and head of studio, Amy Hutnick. Goodbye, everybody.